Hello YouTube folks, welcome to my channel. My name is Steph and today I will be doing a book rant on Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. Now I definitely want to preface this. I know there's a lot of really strong opinions around this book. I know this book was really controversial when it first came out, like 2 years ago at this point? But I just finished it literally yesterday, and I had such a visceral and inexplicable reaction that I was like, I simply have to talk about this book. I am not Asian or Asian American, so obviously I am not the person to go to when you're looking for clarity on this book. This is just going to be me kind of going over the plot, initial reactions and thoughts, and final takeaways. This is just me and how I felt about this book. I'm not the person to go to if you have questions or are struggling with the concepts in this book. I'm just another person who has questions and struggled with this book. I think that's all I'm gonna say to start. Let's start off with the plot and then we can talk a little bit more about the juiciness of it all. So I did kind of write out the plot. I'm gonna read it mostly. It's just easier that way so I don't miss anything. So Athena, a famous Asian American author who has done really well in her career thus far as a young adult, and Juniper, who is struggling and envious and all around kind of a complicated person. They go out for a few drinks one random night. They're not really friends, but they still hang out. They went to school together, so they're like, they have a long history, but they're not really like deeply invested in each other. They get drunk, they go back to Athena's place, and they start making pancakes and having a pancake eating contest, and Athena tragically chokes to death on undercooked pancakes that night right in front of Juniper. Juniper then steals Athena's manuscripts and drafts and just kind of like paperwork on her desk while she's waiting for the ambulance to come and pick Athena's body up. Juniper edits and publishes one of the basically completed drafts that Athena had written about Chinese labor workers during World War I. She also changes her author name from Juniper Hayward, which is her first and last name, to Juniper Song, which Song is her middle name, and she also changes her author photo to look a little more ethnically ambiguous, and obviously the name is also a little bit like questionably Asian sounding, Song as a last name. She also heavily researches Asian history and Asian American history, specifically Chinese history, for this book, and to cover up the fact that she doesn't actually have a ton of knowledge on this race-related topic. An assistant at Juniper's publishing house, her name is Candace, is Asian American, and she strongly believes that this manuscript needs to have a sensitivity reader go over it. The publishing company says no per Juniper's demands, and they're also really close to like publishing time. They're only a few weeks out before the book is like gonna be on sale at stores. So Juniper's excuse is that it's too close. I'm just gonna leave it at that for now. Because Candace was really upset over the whole sensitivity reader thing, and it's kind of implicated that she's upset that Juniper, a white woman, is writing about a very important Asian topic. Goes on Goodreads and gives a scathing review for the book. The book is called The Last Front. Due to the demands of the sensitivity reader and the Goodreads comment, she is fired from the publishing company. Candace is cut. After publishing, it instantly becomes a bestseller and a controversial topic amongst readers and other publishing companies and authors. Some Asian readers say it's inaccurate and stereotypical, and others enjoy the authenticity of this historical researched book. Many right off the bat start to compare Juniper's book to Athena's work, which was always about Asian topics and had a very specific language, and obviously because it was Athena's draft that Juniper plagiarized, it kind of sounds a little bit like Athena. People are like a little bit sus about that, and Juniper very quickly is like, no, we just had conversations about this, and after Athena's tragic death, I was inspired by our conversations and her no longer being able to publish anymore to publish something that, would be similar to what she would published. That was kind of Juniper's way out of that conversation. Juniper becomes really obsessed with reading reviews and like scouring the internet for conversations about Athena and the book that Juniper wrote. Like nonstop is on social media, scrolling on her phone, looking on Goodreads, looking on New York Times, like review lists, all that kind of stuff. A Twitter account emerges called Athena Lou's Ghost, and it starts claiming that Juniper plagiarized her work. She does all this research and somehow figures out that it is Athena's ex-boyfriend, Geoff, who made that account and was claiming that Juniper was stealing Athena's work, and Juniper blackmails Geoff into deleting the account and no longer accusing her. In doing so, they had to meet up, and Geoff was like, I know you stole that because Athena and I talked about that concept. There's no way you didn't plagiarize it, but Juniper continues to deny it, and she blackmails him into deleting the account and no longer talking about that, so she resolves that issue. Juniper then goes to this Asian American community center. I think it's like for older people, I don't remember. It's some sort of like club that older people go to who love to read books about Asian topics. And when the coordinator for that event picks Juniper up, she's like shocked that Juniper is white, and the whole event kind of becomes hostile. The audience ends up being really cordial, and one very old Asian man says his uncle served in the labor camps that she wrote about, and he's grateful for her writing about it. Juniper is kind of microaggressive the whole time. They serve Chinese food and she's like, Chinese food makes me want to throw up. And I don't know, she kind of is strange. I think especially because they're older. She's very microaggressive throughout the whole book, but this was a very particularly strong scene of microaggression. She then goes to an author panel, and the three other authors there are all Asian American women, and Juniper is the only white woman. A person in the audience asks something along the lines of like, how do you have the audacity to write about this very specific Chinese historical event, historical situation as a white woman? And Juniper does this like polished response that she's worked on for a while, and one of the other authors turns to Juniper and says that she's racist and that she's plagiarizing Athena's work, and the whole event becomes really stifled and awkward after that, and Juniper becomes very uncomfortable because she has now been publicly accused of plagiarizing Athena's work by another author who is Asian American. Juniper, after that, starts to get pressure to have another work published, and in addition to that draft of The Last Front that she stole from Athena, she also stole like a couple pieces of paper that had like random pieces of writing, and she finds this paragraph and it's about like a girl in the woods or something, and Juniper plagiarizes that as well, uses it as her opening for a novella she writes called something witch, The Lost Witch or something like that, and publishes it, and it does moderately well. However, Juniper did write the rest of it and kind of turn it into like a semi like retelling of her own story of her relationship with her mother. So she only took the first paragraph versus the whole draft, but she still plagiarized some of Athena's work. This was a huge mistake because Athena had used that paragraph or written it for a writer's workshop that she had done a few years ago, and other writers recognized it and went out and they were like, we literally know you plagiarized this, and there's already accusations that you plagiarized Athena's other work, so like fess up. And Juniper becomes like seriously under criticism, and her own publishing company interrogates her, brings a lawyer, and they're like, what's the dealio with this? Because plagiarizing is a crime, especially for something that you make that much money off of. Juniper kind of admits that it was Athena's work, but she crafts it so that it's like, we collaborated on this and she ran it by me and I wrote it down in a notebook and I forgot that it was hers. So that's on me. I'm happy to give Athena credit for that opening paragraph, but the rest of it is mine, which is true. Juniper then gets asked to teach a workshop for kids like at some high school or college. She catches an Asian American student, a girl, talking to the class about the controversy and the theories surrounding Juniper's credibility with The Last Front and The Lost Witch. And Juniper like severely bullies this student in front of the whole class. And then the like superintendent or whatever calls Juniper and is like, what happened here? And Juniper's like, I quit. So she loses that job after like 2 days for harassing an Asian American student. She starts to become haunted by Athena's ghosts. Like she swears she sees Athena everywhere all the time. in stores in public in her dreams. Then Athena's Instagram account gets reactivated. You know, when you die, typically your social media accounts will like be deactivated, or they'll like make a monument out of it. And it gets reactivated, and new pictures of Athena start getting posted. And there's really cryptic captions that are very clearly targeted at Juniper. And she also somehow made it so no other accounts were following Athena except for Juniper. Nobody could see it except for Juniper. Juniper agrees to meet up with the ghost of Athena because she's like so paranoid, and she's like, I need to squash this bug. She hears Athena's voice like coming from corners but doesn't see Athena. They're like in a stairway or something, and she confesses out loud to the voice of Athena that she did plagiarize the work. And then who walks out of the dark is Candace, the assistant or whatever who worked at the publishing house, who got fired for wanting the sensitivity reader and who for putting the scathing review out on Goodreads. Candace walks out and she's like, I caught you, I'm gonna ruin your life, and you're racist and you're crazy and blah blah blah. And Juniper attacks Candace. They have like a fist fight because she wants the recording that has the audio of Juniper confessing to her crime, and Candace pushes Juniper down the stairway, and Juniper ends up hospitalized. Juniper loses everything. She loses her job, she loses her friends, she loses her following, she broke her clavicle, she's like in the hospital, she's all messed up from falling down the stairs. Candace writes a memoir about the whole thing, and it ends up getting a 7-figure deal. So Girlfriend's doing really well off of the attack that she did on Juniper. Juniper then decides to write her own memoir about the difficulties of being a white woman in an industry pushing for diversity, and how she was attacked by Candace for being inspired by Athena and is determined to become famous again by telling her own story. And the book ends with like this really strong mantra of like, I will get this, I will be famous, I will do anything, I will make them all pay, I will get it all back, etc. And that's how the book ends. All right, let's do initial takeaways. First of all, I want to start off by saying it's not my place, just like I said in the beginning of this video, to be the source of information or reflection or whatever for this book. Please don't listen to me and take it as gospel. I'm a white woman. I'm meant to read this book. I'm meant to have an uncomfortable reaction to it. If you are a person of color, it is your choice whether or not to read about these microaggressions and also the very blatant racism and crimes against the Asian American woman, Athena, in this book. But it's really important to me as both a feminist and a racially just person to consume the content that people of color make that is made to make us think about these things that are so easy to ignore. It's hard to have a set opinion about this book because it's kind of set up like Athena versus Juniper. However, both are pretty morally gray and both are pretty flawed. And also they're both right sometimes. Like if the instinct is to side with Athena, she's dead. She's the minority, and she also had her work plagiarized. But I think the point is to see that she's not perfect too, and not to glorify her, even though it feels like we're supposed to, because she also stole work. She stole stories from Juniper that Juniper had told when they were in college together, and wrote books like about them without Juniper's knowledge or permission. And she also wrote down like verbatim fights she had with Geoff and published them in short stories. So that's not super cool beans. She was also racist towards other minorities a couple times, quoted by Juniper, so maybe that was like through the lens of somebody who really wanted to paint Athena as a bad person. And it also seemed like Athena wasn't a very good friend in general. The instinct is also to hate Juniper, right? She's the super white feminist coded, like, plagiarist who lied to people, obsesses over Athena, and definitely fetishizes, like, Chinese culture. But there were moments of redeemability that were kind of hard to ignore, and I'm not sold that she's completely flawed. She's delusional and racist and a criminal for sure, but there were moments where she said something that I was like, But that may have also been on purpose to show us how easy it is to agree with the side of the white woman in a conversation about something like this. Like, maybe this was intentional to show how we can relate to the racist side of race-related conversations so easily. Like, it's like, well, Juniper wasn't all bad, but we were also in her perspective. So, like, of course she's going to convince us that she isn't all bad because she's convinced that she's not all bad. So I am actually not sure on my stance on that. I still think that the instinct to side one way or the other was not R.F. Kuang's goal. I think her goal was to make you confused and make you unsure of who to agree with. Gray character set in a conversation about race is tricky and ambitious. Anyone other than R.F. Kuang could not have done it, and to have an Asian author write from the perspective of a white woman stealing from an Asian American author is a really compelling and interesting way to kind of do that. Some final thoughts. I think it's meant to be upsetting and unsettling. I think that was her intention, especially for white audiences. And it does this in such a new way that no social biases can protect us from the discomfort. Like, I mean, it was literally written in, 2022? 2023. It just came out last year. So it's set in modern times and there's kind of no way to get around it. I encourage everyone to read this book and think really critically, and instead of jumping into like this or that. Like, we live in a very binary society. Like, it's like Democrat versus Republican, woman versus man, white people versus people of color. And I think this book is meant to make you rethink that whole binary mentality. I don't know how I feel about this book. How can I say I love it? How can I say I hate it? I gave it 5 stars and I put it in like my favorites of 2024 list that I have on Goodreads because it made me think, and whether or not I actually liked the story doesn't matter as much as the fact that it made me step away and think really critically and like have such like a physical reaction that was neither like obtuse or small. Like, it was not in a way that I could pinpoint. It was just like I felt like I had entered another perspective that has not existed yet in my like realm of understanding and consciousness. And it's also like I'm not scared to admit this. Some of the microaggressions that Juniper said and thought, I've said and thought too. And it's really important for me to have that reflected back at me so I can see how not okay they are and see how much more work I need to do and how much more growing I need to do. Because it's so easy to be like, oh, I would never say or do any of these things. Like, you're not helping anybody by doing that. What you need to do is think really critically about these things that are reflected back at you and go, oh, I guess I kind of have thought something similar to that. And now I see how ugly that is through this book that was written by somebody who very much wanted us to face that. I need to adjust that behavior, or I need to have a reaction that's big enough against that initial thought that I had so that I can be more racially just, so I can be a better ally to people of color. That's our job, right? As like socially progressive people, that's our job. If you want to live in a world with equality and with consciousness of other people's existence that may be different and has a lot of like history behind it that is really painful and can be passed down, you have to think like that. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. Like I said, I'm not scared to admit it. I've said and done things that are racist, that are sexist, that are homophobic, and every single day I work against those things. Until the day that I die, I will work to hit that 100% perfect that isn't achievable but has to be strived for anyway. That's our job. And I think reading Yellowface by R.F. Kuang is one way to kind of take a really big step towards that. I think this book is incredible, incredibly disturbing, incredibly delusional, incredibly thoughtful, incredibly well written, etc., etc. I think it's incredible. I think 100 years from now, if the planet is still alive, this will be taught in schools in the same way that like To Kill a Mockingbird and Lord of the Flies is. It really makes you think just like those books do. R.F. Kuang set out to do something and she did it. You know, she did it. I went to an author talks with her and she talks a lot about Yellowface, and people were asking all these like really pointed questions, and every time R.F. Kuang wanted to answer, she was like, yeah, that's the point. I wrote it with very specific intention. It's very different from any of my other like fantasy books. And I think I achieved it because look at your reaction now. You know what I'm saying? I think this book did exactly what she wanted it to. And if you hate it, that's up to you to decide. And if you love it, that's up to you to decide. I just think it's incredible. And I think I will think about it a lot for a long time. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to see continuous book rants. Every time I read a book that makes me either want to like vomit or makes me like, what? Or makes me confused like Yellowface did, I will make a book rant about it. I promise you. Have a great rest of your day. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.